Welcome back to State of the Association. As always, I'm your host, Nash Roberts. We've got week 4 of the NFL season wrapped up. We've got some takeaways from that. And finally, I get to talk about the NBA again. Media Day just happened. There's a couple talking points there. Lonzo Ball and AJ Griffin are the two guys we're going to focus on. I'm excited. The Cowboys defeated the New York Giants 20-15 on Thursday Night Football. I had a little bit of a watch party for this. It was a fun time. We got to watch the Giants lose. And, this is a team that, in my opinion, doesn't really have a ton of direction right now. They've got a quarterback that just paid all this money, and he's not the best quarterback you've ever seen by any means. Daniel Jones is a very mediocre quarterback. He's not a needle mover. And when your roster around him isn't great in the first place. So you kind of need to keep that's going to be able to elevate that roster, and Daniel Jones is not the guy for that. So you've got a middling roster, a middling quarterback. You're really just stuck in purgatory as a team. You're stuck in mediocrity, and that's what you're setting yourself up for. But for the Giants, I do have one positive takeaway, and that is that Malik Neighbors looks amazing for them. He has looked great throughout the first 4 weeks. This past game, he had 12 receptions for 115 yards. And if you've got him in fantasy, you know how great he's been because the last 3 weeks, he's put up at least 23 points, 2 of those being 28-point outings. So, that takes into account receptions, touchdowns, yards, whatever it might be. No matter what metric you want to look at, Malik Neighbors has been great so far. And, we've seen a trend of really good rookie receivers recently. Puka Nacua broke the record last year for most receiving yards by a rookie. And before that, we had Justin Jefferson have a really good year. And then you go back a few years, back in 2016, we had OBJ had an elite rookie year. So receivers, this is a position now, it seems, where they can kind of come into the league and be ready to dominate from day one. Sometimes it takes longer, a guy like Drake London, but in general, I think we're seeing more and more receivers come in and be just that instant offense. So I think that position in general is just kind of really seeing a good resurgence right now, and that's different compared to the quarterbacks. We've seen quarterbacks struggling quite a bit this year. Patrick Mahomes has 6 touchdowns and 5 picks, but I think Malik Neighbors and what some other receivers have done has been really, really impressive, and that's a position now where I think teams can really kind of target them high and say, hey, this guy is going to come in instantly, affect our team instantly, be very valuable, and think about the next 10 years when he's in his athletics prime. After that, he might fall off a little bit, but for first 10 years, if we can keep him around, this is going to be a really solid, a really good foundational piece. And I think Malik Neighbors is just another example of that, and he's having an amazing finally got a win. It was against the Carolina Panthers, but a win's a win at this point. You don't want to start 0-4. 1-3, not that much better, but it sure is going to make a difference in terms of any hopes they have for the playoffs. And for the Bengals, I've said it before, these slow starts are not sustainable if you want to make a playoff run, if you want to push for that Super Bowl, because with the talent on your roster, you really should be. But under their head coach, as long as they've had him, they've had pretty slow starts, especially in the Joe Burrow era, to their seasons. And guess what? They've never won a title in that window, and they made it to the Super Bowl one year. But that's about it. They have one AFC championship to show for it. And they always get off to these 0-2 starts or worse. This year was 0-3. And I think just having the margin for error becomes so little when you start off by losing a couple of games. Your team has to execute week in, week out. And by the end of the season, even if your guys make a push and you make the playoffs, by the time you do that, your team is so fatigued. And it's just not sustainable if you really wish to win a Super Bowl. I think it starts from the head coaching position. It starts from the culture because these guys, they start off the year and they just don't look like they're ready. They look like they could have used a few more weeks to really get in tune with what they're doing. And, Jamar Chase had a great game this past time. And, things are clicking now, but it shouldn't take 4 weeks into the season for things to click. I think the Bengals need to have some head coaching changes, some culture, the whole organization, the culture around it, it just needs to change because these slow starts are not sustainable, and it really hurts the Bengals' chances of ever winning a Super Bowl in the Joe Burrow era. And this is a very talented roster. This is a very talented quarterback, but these slow starts are just making things a lot harder for you, and it's a problem that can be fixed. But you need to fix it because otherwise the Vikings narrowly defeated the Green Bay Packers 31-29, and I don't know how this game became that close because I had to leave at halftime, and by that point it was 28-0 by the time I tuned out, and Green Bay, they almost came back. I think that's a positive for the Vikings because yes, they're 4-0, but it shows that you can't get too confident, especially a good team like the Packers. The teams can and will try to defeat you. That's the whole point of the game. Teams are gonna come in and they're gonna try to win, right? And on any given Sunday, we saw the Raiders defeated the Ravens in week 2, I believe it was. Any given Sunday, any team can show up and show out and upset you. And for the Vikings, I think this showed almost following that huge lead to the Green Bay Packers. It showed that, hey, yeah, we're 4-0, but we can't get too confident. So I think that's good for them. It's kind of a wake-up call, to just stay focused, stay committed, and have a really good year. Sam Darnold looks great. There's, MVP talks for Sam Darnold. This was a guy I had a lot of doubts about, but he's proven me wrong for sure. We'll see how he does. If he didn't have these weapons, how would he do without Jay Jettas, without Jordan Addison? But, he doesn't have Hawkinson, so that's one guy out, and Sam Darnold's been really great. And I think just watching the games, it's not only a matter of him having better weapons, but he's just reading the field better. Shout out to Sam Darnold. Now, for the Green Bay Packers, I don't think Jordan Love was ready. I don't think he should come back this game, especially in the first half. There were just some throws that he otherwise normally would have made. And he was underthrowing balls a lot, and that just comes down to his mechanics. And the Vikings, just with his MCL injury, he wasn't able to really establish himself and get in the right positions to make those throws. So that's one thing, the on the field product. Ultimately, he ended up with 4 touchdowns, but he also had 3 picks. So he did better towards the end of the game for sure, especially that fourth quarter. He was really good. But I think they should have waited a week, especially because my next point here, the Vikings love to blitz, and they were trying to go after Jordan Love quite a bit, and to just see him take it. I'm not even a Packers fan, but I was worried for the man's health just because he was coming back from an injury that he was expected to take longer to rehab from, and he came back early. And, this was the earliest possible week, and the rumors he was going to come back last week. And so to see him come back so early from an MCL injury in, the earliest possible timetable that he could have come back, he did. And he came back against a heavy blitz team. And he ultimately performed all right. 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. 4 touchdowns is great. You don't like the ratio. And I think he'll be better next week, but I'm just glad he didn't re-aggravate anything. Because I think they should have waited another week until he's fully healthy, because he didn't really look like he needed to be out there. He was underthrowing balls. The mechanics were off, and the Vikings were getting to him. And there weren't a ton of sacks on Love, but the pressure did get to him quite frequently. He had to force that ball out, and he'll be fine ultimately. But I think you could have waited a week, and it would have been even better for Jordan Love. Packers are 2-2 now. I don't think they would have won with Malik Willis. Reportedly, Kevin O'Connell had 2 game plans for if they brought in Love or Willis. But yeah, I don't think you should rush Love back. He didn't look like himself this game, but he will be better, and he's going to continue to prove himself to be one of the best quarterbacks in this league. Game I want to talk about, the Baltimore Ravens defeated the Buffalo Bills handedly, 35-10. And for the Bills, I don't think there's too much to take away from this loss. It's a bad loss for sure, losing by 25. But the Ravens are a very, very good team, despite their 2-2 record at this point. And, this is a team that you're going to be competing with for the AFC crown. So, to that extent, yes, it's bad to lose to another contender in your division by this much in your conference. But I think that the Bills will be able to learn from this loss, because it was not a pretty loss by any means. It wasn't close at all. So I think, they're going to be able to watch film on this game, and by the next time, if they have to play the Ravens in the playoffs, they'll be more prepared and ready to put up a fight. But for the Ravens, this team are going to focus on, they finally looking for him. Derrick Henry had a great game, 200 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry, he got off to a little bit of a slow start to the year. The Ravens, during the second half of the Week 1 game, they didn't really use him much at all. And that's a trap that the Ravens have fallen into recently, where if they get down, they go away from what works. And that makes sense to an extent. You want to pass, because then it can stop the clock if a play isn't successful. But the Ravens sometimes lean so much in the pass and just forget the run game entirely when they're down. And so that has been a problem for them. But they look back in form now. This was a huge win against another top AFC team. And I think the Ravens, with this, we can say, hey, they're finally ready. They figured things out. It's taken a month, but they finally figured things out, and they're ready to fight for the AFC again, because what we had seen to this point was not that. This looked like a Ravens team that was demoralized after losing in the AFC Championship last year, and a team that just wasn't ready to compete with other top AFC teams, but they proved on Sunday night that they have what it takes. And the Baltimore Ravens, I'm excited to talk about the NBA again. We just had Media Day. First bit of news, Lonzo Ball is expected to be fully available for the Chicago Bulls come the regular season. And for Lonzo, it's great for him on a personal level. This is a guy who was a really highly touted prospect, and up to this point, he hadn't really lived up to expectations, especially in his stint in LA. He was not very good there, to say the very least. And he just dealt with injuries continuing throughout his career. Whenever he would do something right, he would get injured. We especially saw it with the Bulls a couple of years ago. They were the number 1 seed, led by him, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine. And Lonzo Ball, only putting up 13-5. He was still the orchestrator of the offense, and he was a key piece of their defense along with Alex Caruso. That perimeter defense was great. And he's a really good fast break player to have. So Lonzo, despite, the stats aren't the best, sure, but his impact on the court is very noticeable. So it's good that he's back. I'm sure the Bulls are happy about that. Now, where should they put him? Because Kobe White, I think, really solidified himself as the guy at the point guard position. And, you've got other guards on that team as well. And so I think Lonzo's going to have to come with the bench, especially to start off. And the Bulls, to me, it's just an interesting roster situation. It reminds me of the Magic. They had too many guards, and eventually, they don't have Markelle anymore. So that was their solution to that. And for the Bulls, I think eventually it's going to come to a point where they might have to choose between some guards. And so that's an interesting conversation to have. I think Lonzo's performance is going to, and his ability to stay healthy really, is going to kind of determine his future with that team. And, that's kind of stating the obvious, but he just dealt with injuries so much in the past. I'd hate to see him get hurt again. But it's just always a concern with a guy who's had a history like Lonzo has. But overall, it's going to be good to see him back on the court. And, he's gone years. This is his life's work. His life's work is playing basketball, and he went years without doing that. So I'm sure he's excited to be back as well. And even if it's off the bench, he will have a very positive impact to the NFL for a second, because as I am recording this, Davante Adams officially wants to be traded out of Las Vegas. Now, this is a guy we saw on the Receiver Show on Netflix. He had kind of dealt with frustration because he went there to play with his buddy Derek Carr, and now Carr's gone, and he's had to deal with some bad QB situations. I think Minshew's been underrated for them, but he's had to deal with some bad QB situations. They're not ideal. He's used to play with Aaron Rodgers, and even he wanted to play with Derek Carr. So he knows what it feels like to play with a very, very good and elite all-time quarterback. So to go from that to, Gardner Minshew, Jimmy Garoppolo, it's definitely a change. Aiden O'Connell. And so that's the main reason, right? And so now he wants out of Las Vegas, and that's a team that's not really going anywhere either, so you can't justify it by saying, oh, hey, at least you have a championship window, because you really don't over in Vegas. I like their head coach. I like AP. They've got some solid players, but they're not truthfully going anywhere. So it makes sense that Davante would want out. As for where he goes, Rashee Rice might not come back. Hollywood Brown, I believe, is also potentially out for the season for the Chiefs. As an Eagles fan, or just, fans of all the teams around the league. I don't think we want to see Davante Adams go to the Chiefs of all teams, but it's a possibility with all the injuries they've had. I'm sure they're eyeing it. You know, Patrick needs a wide receiver one at this point with Rasheed out, and you know Xavier Worthy's the wide receiver one for them right now, and Travis Kelce. So the Chiefs are always an option. I would like to see him go to the Jets, reunite with A-Rod. But there's some intriguing spots out there for Davante Adams for sure, and he will not be a Raider by the end of the season most likely. For one last topic, I want to talk about AJ Griffin and his recent decision to step away from the game at just 21 years old. He came out recently and said that he gave up so that he could follow Jesus. And I'm a man of faith myself, so am I a little bit biased in this situation? Probably. But I think it's important that we all respect AJ Griffin's decision. I understand maybe Atlanta Hawks fans who saw AJ Griffin had a really good rookie year, really solid as show potential as a scorer in this league, and then second year wasn't as good. But overall, you know, he had some potential, and so Hawks fans might be a little bit blindsided by this. I think ultimately what the Lord's calling him to do is what AJ Griffin should do. And even if I wasn't, you know, a person of faith myself, I believe that, you know, religion is something that shapes human culture, no doubt. And just, you know, it shapes your actions and how you treat the people around you and your drive and your motivation to do certain things. And so if AJ Griffin doesn't feel called to the game of basketball anymore and he wants to follow Jesus, I think that's a very noble thing to do. And for the basketball side of it, you know, this is, like I mentioned with Lonzo Ball, something he spent his whole life, you know, kind of getting ready for. And he hadn't really even got to start much in the NBA. He only has 2 seasons under his belt. But for AJ Griffin, I think from a personal standpoint, this was the right move for him if he felt compelled to do so. And I'm going to be sad because AJ Griffin was a guy I was really intrigued by. And I think ultimately he could be a what if. Is he going to be a what if on the level of like Derrick Rose? Absolutely not. But I think AJ Griffin is what if in terms of how it could have developed into a very solid role player and scorer. But ultimately stepping away from the game, if it's best for him, then I'm all for it. And thank you, AJ Griffin, for, you know, the fun potential that you had and all the college year. And AJ Griffin, I'll always respect him. I like his game a lot. So yeah. If he doesn't feel like it's right for him to be in the NBA, then that's his decision ultimately. And just thank you for everything today. Thank you for listening. This wasn't my favorite episode in terms of flowing delivery, but you know we're just trying to get better each and every time. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host Nash Roberts. It has been State of the Association.